collected all of the most common beginner chess advice, and today we'll be going through them one by one, actually explaining the logic behind them, talking about when they apply, when you should follow the rule, and more importantly, when you shouldn't follow the rule. We'll have examples for everything, of course. So if you're a beginner looking to improve, you're definitely in the right place. And the first beginner piece of advice I see, which is by far the most common, appearing in 22 of the 22 sources I looked at, is control the center. Now when people talk about the center, what specifically are they talking about? They're talking about these four squares: d4, d5, e4, e5. In my system by Nimzovich, it gives the advice of developing by putting 1 or 2 pawns in the center, and then developing each of your pieces only once. In order to control the center of the board, a knight developed to f3 and c3 help to control the center, pawns on e4 and d4 help to control the center, as well as bishops develop to c4 and f4, and while your knights usually want to be on c3 and f3, developing your bishops to d3 and e3, instead of attacking your opponent's center, will reinforce your center. Last thing to note is that a fianchettoed bishop can defend or attack the center. After all, they're on the long diagonal. Let's talk about some circumstances where you could break this rule. The first, and in my opinion the most obvious, is going to be hyper-modern openings. For example, the King's Indian defense. There are openings in chess, like the King's Indian, where instead of immediately trying to control the center, you instead exert pressure on the center with your minor pieces, and then you strike out in the center later on. However, if you don't know what you're doing, I would highly recommend not playing like this and instead just controlling the center of the board. Classical openings tend to be a lot easier to play for beginners than hyper-modern openings. Another reason you may want to ignore the rule control the center be for a specific tactical reason. For example, this type of trap is common against the London system, where you're able to win a tempo on their dark bishop while threatening their light bishop. This is an example of a position where you'd be willing to completely blow up your center, because after all, you've done the concrete calculation and you know that you'll end up a piece. The final thing I want to talk about, since this is a video for beginners, is what if your opponent just doesn't follow these rules? They play random, passive nonsense. After all, I'm sure you've all run into someone who plays like this, and it's more than likely that you've lost to a few of them. First of all, get destroyed. Second of all, let's talk about how to handle this stuff. And usually the best way to punish someone who's not playing principled is by playing even more principled. That way your small advantages start to accumulate. As you can see, our position here is allowing us to completely dominate the center of the board. This is going to give us a lot of flexibility our opponent does not have. For example, kicking knights, blocking their strong bishop. Plus we have the ability to deploy our bishops to any square we want really, where our opponent's position is much more cramped, and they can't develop a knight to f6 or c6 without it getting kicked. These are all very important considerations. And then once we finish developing and we've castled our king, it's time to start playing for an attack. Last note is that I was analyzing some beginner games earlier, and I noticed beginners, you guys really like fianchettoing sometimes even on both sides. It's important to note that a fianchetto structure is an extremely solid defensive structure, so it can be really important to remember to trade off the fianchetto bishop before you start attacking. Otherwise, even with a lead in development and space, you may run into some difficulties. And with that, we're ready to move on to the next rule. This is a rule for the opening phase of the game that says you should develop your knight before you develop your bishops. And considering this is the second most common piece of advice, you've probably heard it, but do you know why? Because there are a couple of reasons. First of all, knights always exert direct pressure on your opponent's center, and your knights by default almost always want to be on c3 and f3. Developing your knights to d2 and e2, while it does defend your center, is usually going to be suboptimal. And since your knight can attack your opponent's pawn, it can also prompt a response. And when it comes to chess, forcing moves tend to be pretty good. On the other hand, bishops are more likely, especially on the 4th and 5th rank, to become the victim of forcing moves in tactics. For example, in this position, we can play knight takes e5 and then push d4, forking the 2 pieces. But the most important reason you should develop your knights before your bishops is that bishops are reactionary. What does that mean? It means while your knights almost always want to be on c3 and f3, where your bishops want to be will depend a lot more on how your opponent plays their position. You can't attack a knight that isn't there, for instance. And it's also important to take your opponent's pawn structure into account. If we started by developing our bishop, they in turn could start with e6, making our bishop much less effective. This is another reason you want to develop your bishops reactively. So, what are some exceptions to this rule? Developing your kingside, like in the Italian game. Prioritizing your kingside development and getting castled is just good classical chess. And it also helps that in these openings, you're already reasonably sure where your bishop wants to go. For example, in e4, e5 openings, since your opponent can't play e6 anymore, a bishop on c4 is almost always going to be good. Another reason you'd break this rule is opening specific reason. For example, in the Alekhine's defense, which I'm currently recording a video on, this is a hyper-modern opening, where your light bishop tends to be your worst minor piece. This is a very common position in the Alekhine defense, and here we'll want to prioritize developing our bishops. First of all, because there's an opportunity to trade off our bad minor piece that may not be there in the future, especially if they play something like h3. And then, just like in the last example, we'll want to prioritize fianchettoing our dark bishop to prioritize kingside development and getting our king safe. So depending on your opening, there's plenty of exceptions to this one, but overall, I would say if you're playing classically, knights before bishops is a very solid rule to follow. This ties us into our next rule: castle early and castle often, and the reasoning for this is pretty straightforward. We'll use an example position from the Evans Gambit. So in this position as the black player, you'll notice we're still 2 moves away from castling. The reason for this is we've been collecting pawns. We're currently up 2 points of material. Meanwhile, our opponent has been focused on development, and they are 1 turn away from castling. The best move here for white is to castle and to offer up yet another pawn. The reason for this is we've completely neglected our kingside development. So if we continue to grab pawns, sure, we are up 3 pawns now, but tactics are going to start appearing on the board because our king just isn't safe. And don't forget, king safety is always your priority in chess. That's number 1, besides, like, I don't know, having fun. And a lot of these tactics are going to appear on the f2 and f7 squares. And the reason for that is if we go to the starting position of a chessboard, you'll notice every single pawn is defended. You'll notice that our 2 center pawns are defended 1, 2, 3, 4 times each. However, our 3 flank pawns are only defended once each. Of these, by far the weakest is the f7 square in our position, because it's only defended by the king. Now compare this to a castle position, perhaps with a fianchetto, and notice our f-pawn is protected twice, the dark squares around our king are all protected, our h-pawn is defended twice, g5 pawn is defended twice. There are a lot of beginners losing games to early traps and early opening tactics. The most surefire way to avoid these is just getting castled early. Now, when are some times we can ignore this advice? The first thing to note is if you've pushed your c-pawn or say your g-pawn after you castle, that is where your king's going to end up. You probably don't want to open up the file where your king is. So if you've played a move like g4, g5, c4, c5, you're probably not going to end up castling that way, and it's safe to go ahead and castle short. And here's a position in the Jabava London is black where we would definitely want to delay our castling, breaking the rule of castling early and castling often. And what's the reason for that? Well, they're clearly attacking on the king side, which is the side that we're much closer to castling on. And if we were to prioritize castling early, they castle long and we castle short, you'll notice the engine here, it really doesn't like black's position. And the reason for that is we castled right into their attack. The next rule is don't bring the queen out early. Now, why is this? Why shouldn't you bring the queen out early? Well, because it's so valuable, and you can gain time by attacking it with less valuable pieces and pawns. For example, here's a line in the Scandinavian defense. This is the Leonhard Gambit. Watch how even though I'm giving up a pawn, I can just keep attacking the queen with less valuable pieces. And all our opponent is doing is moving around their queen. But in the meantime, we're making our pieces great. And while our opponent has only been moving their queen around and is up a pawn, we've already developed both of our knights. We're exerting control on the center of the board in more than one way, and we even have a free tempo move with our rook due to the discovery. So even though it can be tempting to go for an early scholar's mate or something, your queen is the second most important piece on the board, so you're probably only going to be capturing stuff with it that's undefended. Meanwhile, your opponent is happy to capture your queen with literally anything they have. So what are some exceptions to this? Well, like I just showed you, the Scandinavian defense is actually a very solid defense, especially for beginners, where you do bring your queen out early. So the first exception would be just if you're in theory, and really the only other exception to this rule is going to be for tactical reasons. Pins on your queen a lot of the times can be exploited in a tactics. It's fairly often that a queen check can be used to pick up a bishop that's hanging on the 4th or 5th rank. On to our next rule, do not move the same piece twice in the opening phase of the game. I think this is a terrific rule. After all, your goal in the opening should be getting developed as quickly as possible. By getting developed, I mean bringing out your minor pieces and controlling the center of the board. And then of course getting castled, but say instead you spend your time just moving the same piece over and over, and notice how our win rate starts to go down, and then we'll capture, moving it a 3rd time, and notice the more time we spend in moving around the same piece, even if we're playing forcing moves, is just giving our opponent more wiggle room to get the lead in development on us. So if you're in the opening phase, and you're about to play a move, and that move isn't helping you develop, you should definitely think twice. So what are some exceptions? This is a position I get in the close Sicilian from time to time, and here I really like the move Knight d4, which completely breaks the rule I just gave you. After all, we've only developed one piece, but here we're moving it again. So why am I willing to break this rule? Our opponent either has to take the knight or not take the knight. First, let's say they don't take the knight. I'm threatening to capture, winning a ton of time and space on my opponent. This is going to help me control the center and develop my other pieces. On the other hand, say they do capture. This actually comes with tempo. After all, we capture back with the pawn and that kicks their knight. Say they go back to e2, we then have queen g5, earning yet another tempo. And if they take, we even get a nice fork. So with that in mind, the only reason you should move a piece twice in the opening is to gain time on your opponent. If you're not gaining something like space or time or something concrete, you definitely should not move the same piece twice in the opening. The next rule is to place your rook on open files, and we'll go back to the Leonhardt Gambit for this example. Now you've probably heard the rule that pawns are worth 1 point, knights and bishops are worth 3 points, your rooks are worth 5 points, meanwhile queens are worth 9 points. But has this ever struck you as odd? After all, in most games, don't your rooks kinda suck? Especially as a beginner, they just don't do that much. It's really your knights and your bishops getting all the action, all the tactics, right? And the reason for that is that the board is cramped. Almost all beginner games are decided in the opening or in the middle game. Rooks really shine in the end game. Knights can jump over things, bishops can go between pawn structures, but rooks on the other hand are weaker the more that's on the board. So while a rook, say behind a passed pawn in an endgame, is an absolutely killer piece, most of your actual attacking in the middle game will be done with your knights and bishops. So rooks love open files. After all, unlike a rook that's not an open file, they actually get to exert some kind of pressure on the game. So what are some exceptions to this rule? Well, if there's a larger priority, like developing your pieces and castling, that should usually be prioritized over getting your rook to the open file. The only reason we played an early rook b8 here is because we were able to do it with tempo on the queen. Only other exception, I don't know, something's hanging. I feel like this one's pretty straightforward. Moving on. The next most common rule is to be careful and think before you make a pawn move. After all, pawns cannot move backwards, and if you're not careful, your opponent can create some pretty nasty isolated weaknesses. This is especially true when it comes to not overextending your pawn center. Only does every pawn push create a weakness, but overextended pawns can also be punished, and this is exactly what players of slower defenses like the French and the Caro-Kann are hoping for. But considering this rule is just saying be careful, I don't really know if there are any exceptions we can go over. I guess just putting a pawn in the center at the beginning of the game, you don't really have to be careful about that. The next common piece of advice is to learn and master the basic tactics. These are forks, pins, skewers, and sometimes discovered attacks depending on who you ask. First, a pin is when a less valuable piece is pinned to a more valuable piece. For example, say we develop like this, and they push d5. Can't do that because the piece is pinned. Now, there are two types of pins. There are relative pins, and there are absolute pins. What we just looked at was a relative pin. An absolute pin is when it is literally illegal to move your piece. This only occurs when a piece is pinned to the king. Now you might be thinking, what's the difference between a piece being pinned to the king and a piece being pinned to the queen? And the answer is, if a piece is pinned, but it's only a relative pin, it can still be involved in tactics like this, because while it's pinned to a valuable piece, it can still legally move. Next up is forks. This is a trap you'll notice a ton of beginners fall for in the Jabava London system. Knight c6 is considered a really bad move because we have knight b5 threatening a fork. What are we forking? The king and the rook. That's right, a fork is when a piece is attacking two other pieces, usually of more value like a king, or pieces or pawns that just aren't defended. And here's another example of a fork where they capture, we capture back. They move their knight, and we capture on d5 with queen. After all, if they capture our queen, which 75% of players do, we can win it back with a fork. And something important to note about tactics before I move on, and somewhere where beginners will very often go wrong, is making sure that your opponent actually doesn't have counterplay. And counterplay is almost always either moving the piece that's the quote-unquote victim of the tactic, like this pin. They could just move their bishop back to d5, and then look at that, the pin is broken. The piece is now defended. And the other type of common counterplay, of course, is attacking a more valuable piece. For example, we play b3 thinking we have a pin, and they just deliver the check. After all, the king is a lot more valuable than this bishop. But by the same vein, if you ever find yourself in a position where it seems like you're the victim of a tactic, these two places are usually where your counterplay is, either moving the affected piece in such a way negate the tactic, or finding a counterattack that's more pressing. Here's a pretty typical example of a skewer. Sorry for my pronunciation on that. English is in fact my first language, but a skewer is when you are attacking a more valuable piece, and behind it is a less valuable piece that it cannot defend. For a more fun example of a skewer, there's a very famous trap in the Alban counter gambit, which I have a video out on, and it goes a little something like this. Bishop d2. We capture their pawn and they capture back our bishop, which is a mistake because we can capture. Their queen is under attack, so they can't capture back. They have to go to e2. Now, the only way to make this work is to capture with check, which means under promoting to a knight, and then take their queen. However, if they're one of the 80-something% of players who capture the knight, we have a very nice skewer here, again attacking the more valuable piece, the king, with a less valuable piece, the queen, behind it.